Thank you, Thomas. And this is my first trip to Brazil, and I'm very, very excited to be here. So let me show you how far I have traveled. Okay. So directly from Singapore to Sao Paulo is 16,000, but I had to make an even longer trip. And to just help us understand each other, this is Sao Paulo, and this is Singapore. So I'm in a very, very big country. I'm reminded about it many, many times yesterday. So this is me. I'm at the same time the chairman of the Center for Liveable Cities, and also in a kind of planning and architecture consultancy. And the reason I'm talking about Singapore experience is because in the past, I was the chief planner of Singapore about 20 years ago. So my planning career is interesting because Singapore, we became independent from the British government in 1960. And I joined the government soon after that and got involved in public housing and city planning. And therefore, in the last 20 years, I was doing work overseas and as well as Singapore, and give me a chance to have a perspective of how Singapore did the urban planning. And it is a good story, which I'm going to share with you. And this is just to show that my overseas experience is quite a lot in city planning and in architecture. Okay, now, so I feel that the fact that Singapore did well is because we did try to plan our city intelligently. In my view, planning profession is still a young profession, and people just draw their ideas on a piece of paper, and therefore invites a lot of opinions about what planning is about without actually being held accountable, because the effect of what you talk about can only be felt 20 years later. And this is a real danger of planning, and it's very important that we have to learn how to select good ideas and develop our skill to plan our city. And also, we tend to be a little bit easy about planning because, you see, if you are a dentist, you should not do the work of an eye doctor. But in our profession as planning, architects also do planning, landscape architects also do planning. Actually, planning itself is a profession requiring a lot of skill. And also, in my view, the planner's job is not so much to impose his personal ideas, but to translate a lot of ideas, a lot of data into spatial planning. And so we have to have a high degree of objectivity and rationality. And to my mind, there are 4 types of planner. One is like urban, if a city is like a person, the easiest way to become a planner is to beautify the city, but without solving the fundamental problem. The next step is to try to re-look at the city and see how to assemble the city to make it work better. But a city is a kind of sick person. The next level is to be able to understand the problems and then solve the problem like an urban doctor. But would be very, very desirable is a planner, when he puts a plan together, he becomes a prophet. That means every line he draws and every color he puts on, he can predict what would happen 20 years later. Then I think a city will be well planned. So because of that, I feel that I'm proposing this towards intelligent planning. First of all, the city government must have the will to plan the city well. Without that, nothing else would happen properly. And when you have a will, yes, you listen to all kinds of theories which are now floating around the world, lots and lots of theory. But you must have the skill to select the relevant theories. And also, you must also estimate the population size of the city, because different population size would demand different types of plans. So then you determine how to organize the city into urban cells. I'll just explain it to you later. And then calculate the floor areas and so on, and the land area. So the city government has to go through that process. And then we put a plan together. There are certain concepts which I feel is not sufficiently highlighted in planning profession. And that is, we have to plan the cities in hierarchies, from big area to smaller area to even smaller. And even the roads, you have the expressway, the arterial road, the minor roads, commercial center, your CBD, the local shopping centers. We have to plan them with this hierarchy concept. And then after that, after we will calculate all these things out, how do you put them together? You have to consider economic, social, ecological, environmental, engineering factors behind, and it's only then you put the city, you put the master plan together. And to do so, you have to do systematically and intelligently. And that's my definition of what is intelligent planning. And I'm happy to say that in Singapore, we went through this process. So let's talk about Singapore, how we try very hard to make this an intelligent plan. First of all, those who go to Singapore would think that it's easy to plan Singapore because we had no historical baggage, we had no serious problem. It's not true. The old Singapore, let me just explain to you. The old Singapore was dilapidated, poor, and backward. For example, in 1960, when we had 1.9 million people, 1.3 million people lived in this kind of condition. By 1985, they totally disappeared. And this is because of intelligent planning. And the downtown of Singapore in 1970 looked like this. But then we try to improve it. So the Singapore today, first of all, we have modern business centers, housing, industrial estate, and so on. And also we have very good external links, airport, seaport, even cruise terminals. Okay, so the downtown you saw earlier now becomes this. And not only we build new buildings, all the buildings with the red roofs, they are protected by law. Nobody can put them down. Now, these are historical buildings. This is public housing. 82% of people live in this kind of housing. And but just now I was talking about development, but we also pay attention on this protection. Like we actually have saved about 7,000 units of old buildings, and we also protect our secondary jungles and open spaces, and also even the underwater environment, because we took care of the water pollution, so the marine life can survive very well underground. And so by protecting the old things, you actually have a colorful city. This is Chinatown. This is the Malay area. This is Indian, and we have all kinds of festivity all the time. And even this one was at one time used as a Chicago University for their executive program. It's an old house. And of course, we have a famous breakfast hotel. Now, how did we transform the city? Okay, first of all, we wanted our city to be unique but tropical, and also it's excellent. And later we added this statement as to have a healthy and beautiful city to live, work, play, learn, and move with transportation. So And I think in city planning, what is very important is when you plan, you have to calculate how much you're planning, what kind of population, how much land you want to occupy. So we spent 4 years calculating what we want to plan before we started planning. And then after that, after the calculation, after analyzing the needs, we create a series of systems. That means for different types of users, we create it's a subsystem, and then put the subsystem together into a total system. So actually city planning is not about project, it's about city system building. This is the most important part of the Singapore plan, because the blue area is the commercial area, and all these lines are metro lines. So where the metro lines intersect would be the major commercial center. So our city is planned as a public transportation oriented city. So the dependency on car is very, very low. So using this as a guide, we started to plan. We protect the historical buildings, protect the green areas, and then we divide this, even though it's a very small place, we still divide this into, something wrong with the computer, into regions, then 25 new towns, and then within each region we have a regional center. Within new town we have the new town centers. And so the city is not just designed or planned as one big area, it's subdivided into smaller areas. And then we put the metro line and the expressways, and even put the major infrastructure as early as possible, so they would not affect the quality of life of the people living or working in the city. And then, so each one of this is a system in itself, and we combine all the systems together and kind of massage them so that this became the basis of our master plan. This is the master plan. So for new towns, we also, using this as a starting point, then we see that, this is one region, and under which you have different new towns with the town centers. If I take this one as an example, after you develop in detail, it's like this. And how do we put it together? The red lines are the expressways, okay? And then these are the metro lines, the town centers, the arterial roads, the kind of green belt, and each one of the yellow boxes is like a neighborhood. Under the neighborhood, we have the neighborhood centers, and below the neighborhood, we have the precincts, and around the precinct, we also have green areas. So Singapore became a garden city because this is our prototype, and we plan all our new towns basically based on this. For example, for this one, based on the prototype, this is how we put the roads together, local roads. And also, it's important that in the new town we have good amenities, facilities. So the amenities and facilities like schools and so on, they are distributed for the convenience of residents. Okay, on the actual plan it's like this. And therefore, in a new town land use, only 45% of the land is for residential. The rest is actually for all other amenities and so on. And also because our density is very high, so how do we kind of give the feeling to the people that it's not very, very dense? So we plan very carefully. The black areas are the high density area. The color areas are the low density areas. So you're always in between high density and low density. and therefore you don't feel the density at any place. And the inspiration came from the Western chessboard. You see the chessboard? So actually planning is very simple. You just look at the Western chessboard, you know how to plan. So, but the result of that is, this is one of the more recent public housing projects. And looking into it is like this. But although we're planning for something new, we also try to capture some of the local flavor. For example, the roof of this, the inspiration for the roof came from this old Malay village. Okay, so we have a kind of local flavor. So I want to say that when you have to deal with a very big city, the prototype, creating a prototype, a good, rational, or intelligent prototype, and then apply the prototype on the actual sites, is a kind of quality control. Okay, and by doing, and also just now I show you the distribution of high and low density. It creates an illusion that it's not really so dense. So because in Brazil you may not have this problem of dealing with high density, but all over Asia we have to deal with the problem of high density. So how can you have high density without feeling the high density? It's a challenge to us. And in the case of public housing, we actually did not just do housing. We actually created a community with a lot of amenities, with good environment, protecting ecology, good accessibility and livability. So let's go to, after all this effort, what did we achieve? Okay, for example, in 1960, our population per square kilometer is 3,000 persons per square meter. Now it's 7,600. But I just want to say that when we face this problem of high density, we must have the willpower to make sure that despite the high density, the quality of our environment continue to improve. And I think we have demonstrated that this is possible. Now, despite the high density, if you look at this chart, the horizontal chart is livability, the vertical chart, the vertical axis is density. And Singapore has both high density and high livability, and I think that's a result of intelligent planning. And of course, other indices of intelligent planning, the result we have Singapore ranked the best livability and quality of life in Asia, the greenest city in Asia, and also business-friendly. Of course, the environment contributes to being a business-friendly country in the world. Okay, and despite the hard work that I gave you the impression, it's a big business center, big commercial center, and yet we are among the top 10 best nightlives in the world. So we know how to work hard and play hard as well. So in other words, we have good ecology, we protect our ecology. We have good new environments for living. And the infrastructure works, traffic flows, and also by 1985, from 1960 to 85, we achieved this. No more squatters, no more homeless people, no poverty ghettos. You can't find a concentration of poor people, no ethnic enclaves. And economically we're prosperous, and 93% of the people who are citizens or permanent residents own their own homes, meaning apartments mostly. And also the city is safe, it's comfortable, simple to use. That kind of, in a summary, is the reward that we have earned. But what is interesting is that when you plan very carefully, especially in a small place like Singapore, we achieve something that, which is quite surprising. We are the world's second largest oil refining city, even though we have no oil resources. We have 30 golf courses and 10 airstrips. Airstrips are very important for us for self-defense. for protecting the territory of Singapore. And so I think in summary, there's a survey to say that Singaporeans are very happy. Now, in looking back, I would say that if I summarize the story of Singapore, the dark blue is the ocean, the light blue is the sky. I think political leadership is very important. Okay, and then our initial worry was survival. Okay, I think there's something wrong with the computer. It doesn't, maybe I'll skip this one because it doesn't make sense. Okay, I'll skip this one. Something wrong with the computer. The images just don't make sense. I'll skip this. Yeah. But basically the conclusion is that for a city to be done well, political leadership and the leadership willpower and commitment is most important. And in Singapore, we're fortunate to have that. And the leadership, together with the planners, must think through the problem very clearly and have the courage to do things which may be against the world trends. For example, we decided to go for high-rise, high-density housing. That was totally against the world trends in the 60s and 70s. But we thought through the problem. We decided that if we didn't do so, we could not solve the housing problem for the whole, all the citizens. So we went ahead and do it, but continue to find a way to solve the negative impact of public housing and succeeded. So we need a skill, a lot of skill. And then, of course, to do so, we have to have the right value, good principle. We have, and I mentioned earlier, city planning is about system. It has to be put together very systematically and also have a clear sense of priority. Okay, that means what we need to do first, then second, then third, and don't get them mixed up. And then we have to relate the hardware, the built environment with the software, the government regulation. They have to work very well together. And this is how I think if we do so, we have a good city which earn the respect of people outside Singapore. So, having gone through this, I just want to share with you, there are many principles that we learn in the process, but today I'm going to show with you just the following one, and that is, again, I want to stress again that our approach to planning is to plan the city intelligently and not for fancy, not for sex appeal, just plan intelligent. And very important concept of planning, which people don't talk a lot, is that you have to divide the city into smaller urban cells, urban units, and then solve the problem locally. But of course, the total system must be rational. And then in Singapore, I'm going to show you with you how do we implement the plan, the master plan, how do we implement it? Okay, this one you saw earlier. It's important that we plan our city rationally. We have to analyze everything. We have to develop our skill to do it. And so one of the key factors in this creating the intelligent city is to estimate the population size and see how we can subdivide. Now, let me just explain to you. You see, in a lot of the planning textbooks, under a city, we only have new towns. And that was okay when the urban population was like 2 to 3 million people. But now, that was soon around the Second World War. But now, I think the cities have tens of millions of people, or 30 million people. So that concept of under the city, you have the new town, is no longer adequate. So in Singapore, for the whole city, we divide them not only in terms of new towns, but in terms of regions. That means above the new town, there's a region, basically regional center. and then above that is a city. So it's subdivided from city to regions, then to new towns. But that's only for 5.5 million people. But when you have a city of 20 million or 30 million people, this is still not adequate. So if you compare this with human being, if we have just new town and a city, it's like having grandparents and the children, with no parents in between. But in Singapore, we have the grandparents, parents, and the children. But for mega city, okay, without the parents, this is how it works. And it will create a lot of traffic problem. But for mega cities, you actually need to have new towns, the regions, the cities, and then I call it constellation city, like the stars in the sky. So that means then this city will have great-grandparents, parents, grandparents, parents, and children. This is the way it works better. You subdivide, you distribute the amenity, you distribute the traffic to the local areas, so that only for special occasion you have to go to the city center. And that's how we solve our traffic problem, plus the metro system. Without that, a lot of cities are planned like this, with no segregation of hierarchy. And therefore, you create a lot of traffic, wasting a lot of time on the road, and also burning up a lot of petrol. So in Singapore, this is how it was done, as you saw. So in doing the city plan, most important thing is to make a long-term projection to see what population size you're planning, and then create the urban cells, as you saw earlier. Because for different population size, the different population size support different types of capacity. The fewer people there are, the fewer capacity amenities or facility can support. And then, so you have to start with this population projection and also subdivide them into urban cells. Then, some people say, how can this principle be applied in other countries? Well, I have applied, for example, this is a project in Russia. Not only that this is at the new town level, not only that the plan is completed, the Kazan government is now implementing, building these new towns, which looks like this, okay? And because in Russia, you know, there are very few people and with a lot of land, so there's no need to build high-rise. So I was having a lot of fun to design a low-rise in community. It's a change from my usual work to plan high-rise. Then in China, in Qingdao, okay, it's for about 3/4 people. So this is like a region with 5 new towns. The original plan was like this, not paying enough respect to the land, the feature of the land. So try to rework. So this is the final plan I produced, and they are now working and developing this plan. Okay, and city, just want to show you, this is historically a very famous city. I planned for 3.8 million, although existing plan is 1.3 million. Why 3.6? Because China is in the process of rural-urban migration. So I did a projection and convinced them that their city in the next 60, 70 years will grow to see 3.8 million. So plan for that. Okay, so existing plan was like this, 1.3 million. So I convinced them to plan like this. Again, you can see that there's a lot of urban system inside. The road system, this commercial system, and so on. And then this is the central business district. And the other city which I planned in Saudi Arabia, also a city for 1.5 million people. And again, I had a lot of fun with this one because it is a city that grows out of the desert. The only thing that's on the desert are the camels, nothing else. So and this is original city. because it's a flat, it's a clean piece of land. There's no reason, this is planned by other people, there's no reason to make the city look as if the roads and so on are twisted around to compromise for the existing constraints, because this is just a clean piece of land. So the government asked me to look at this. I said, well, if you want me to look at this, I'm going to replan. So this is what I did. Okay, and in fact, after this was done, the traffic engineer who did the first plan said, wow, this is like a dream come true, because everything works like a dream, yeah. So, but then I also currently do a plan in Xi'an. It's for 12 million people, and over an area of about 2,000 square kilometers. Now, so that red boundary is about for about 12 million people. This is the existing plan. For 12 million people, you have a city like this, destroyed it, just doesn't make sense. Okay, so what I did was to organize it, put in the expressway, put in the commercial center, locate the industrial area, and basically, and also protect all the pink areas are historical sites, protect them from being destroyed any further. So this is what I call the conservation city, the super large city. Anyway, let's go to the next principle. And that is, when we plan a city, we have to set the vision, then create the master plan, the detailed plan, urban design, in proper steps. You don't skip. And as we go through each step, the government should then design the infrastructure for the city. Then you pass the legislation, you do your promotion, and then you do the development. Okay, this is a kind of desirable flow chart. But in Singapore, we are lucky to have a very good public housing policies. So the public housing policy with the new town plan that you saw earlier, and with a lot of housing being built, we could clear the squatters very quickly. And when the squatter is cleared, the land left behind will be used for public housing as well as for other uses like commercial centers, industrial parks, and so on. So, in other words, in Singapore, we have a good vision, and then we make sure that the city functions properly, and we have a very bold kind of public housing program to make sure that and also, but because of that, then we help clear the land for new development, and also house every citizen within 25 years. And all these things help economic development. Okay, but in reality, many cities don't plan the city plan properly. See, these boxes, they're all kind of off, it's not like this. And also the engineering work for infrastructure is normally not well done. And promotion may be generally okay, but when you promote on the basis of a plan that doesn't work very well, you don't get very good result. And also, very few cities have a good public housing program to help clear the land, supply the land for other development. So I think we need good plans, very important, but we also need effective process to achieve the three words that every city wants: speed, quantity, and quality. To develop quickly in large amounts, but with good quality. And Singapore, by having a very sound urbanization process, we managed to achieve that. Now, if you look at the planning process here, okay, those four boxes, and if I enlarge that and show what would a planner have to do? First of all, the government, the city official must set very good visions. Then the planners would create good master plan, good detailed plan, as well as creating beautiful macro environment, local environment, beautiful urban design. Because shortage of time, I can't say too much. All I want to say is that to create good master plan and detailed plan, the planner's job is really to assemble a perfect machine for living. It has to function very beautifully. But to create macro environment, local environment beautifully, you have to really treat the land not just as a heap of earth. You have to treat the land with feeling and then romance with the land. And I think you have a beautiful city. Now, so in short, we have to have the right value with a good scientific approach. We have to have the artistic approach. Or put it even, if somebody asks me, what are the key principles of creating a good city plan? Are the three statements I want to make. To have the humanist heart, a scientist's head, and the artist's eyes. Okay. And if, so the humanist, you see the humanist heart, just very quickly, we look at land, traffic, infrastructure, society's problem, social problem, amenities, ecology, environmental issue, economic issue, education, cultural entertainment. And the last thing we want to do is to create landmarks. Because if you get the first 10 things done well, the landmarks would come up by itself. And the total city will look beautiful. But if we focus our mind on the landmarks and ignore the rest, you don't get a good city. So now the scientist hat. You see, in Singapore, we actually, this is the planning process in Singapore. We plan for the, you consider the political, democratic, economic factors, environmental factors, engineering factors, and put all these factors into the plan under that sort of machine for living. This one is a master plan. And after you finish the master plan, then you do the regional plan. Let me subdivide, in the case of Singapore, 5 regions. And after that, you plan the new towns. And then after that, you plan the neighborhoods, and then the precincts. And only then you design the buildings. Now, it is tedious, it's hard work, it's exhausting, but in Singapore, we went through every step of it. That's how you can. Now, if you didn't go through every step of that, what happened? You get flood, okay, you get pollution, you get traffic congestion. That's not what we want. But I'm not talking about planning a city without soul, without feeling for the land. So we need the artist's eyes. Okay, when you want to kind of do the makeup for a lady, the lady on the left-hand side obviously was done with love, with care. The one on the right is just without feeling. Now, can a highly educated planner or a city government do such a stupid thing like this? I think you think that I'm exaggerating. Not so. Many cities are done like this. Okay, very few cities are done like this. And that's why it's very alarming to see Oxford is done with care and feeling. But many, many big cities are done this way. Many cities. So I think this is the problem of urban planning. So in my view, to put the city together intelligently, we need a humanist heart, scientist head, and artist eyes. And so don't be seduced by iconic buildings and so on, because those things are less important. They are like the medals on your dress, but you first must have a healthy body, must have a nice dress, before you worry about the jewelry on your body, on your dress. Now, because this conference also touches on water, so I thought I'll just briefly take you through the Singapore water story. I'm not a water expert, so but I actually consulted my friends and put together this short presentation to all of you. Okay, these are the few topics I want to talk about water. Okay, very quickly. Again, just like city planning, the top leaders' commitment and willpower to solve the water problem is very important. In this case, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew himself, from very early, around 1960s, was already determined to make Singapore self-sufficient in water supply. Even though we had a lot of water. Okay, maybe you see the next slide. You see, today in Singapore, the 55% of the water came from Malaysia. Okay, but we're trying to, 55, about, this is a rainwater, 60%, some of that from Malaysia, about 40% from Malaysia, 20% from Singapore. But by 2030, we want to increase the new water, increase the desalination of seawater. What is new water? New water is to convert sewer water into drinkable water. And actually, I've been drinking this a lot, and so far I'm not sick. Okay. In fact, the new water is not suitable for drinking because it's too pure. It lacks the minerals inside the normal drinking water. So most of the time, we will pump the water, the new water, which is too clean, into the reservoir to mix with the minerals and so on, and then supply to the people. Okay, and then of course, in the future, because the population continue to increase, but the supply from Malaysia probably would not increase. So we depend more and more on new water and also on desalination. And the reason we want to be more dependent on this is because we also worry that because of the global warming, we may not get a lot of rainwater, so we have to depend. These two are more dependable. So what are the key policies? 3 key policies. Capture every drop of rainwater. Okay. Collect every drop of used water, the sewer water. And also recycled into usable. So that means every drop of water in Singapore will be reused many times. And that's how, because we're committed to make sure that when the Malaysian government, in case they don't supply water to Singapore, we are not short of water. And then, so this is like the flow chart. Rain, then you collect the water, okay, then put in a reservoir, treat them. And also we get some seawater, desalinate them, and combine, then we will produce the supply to the people. But after you supply, you have the water, some of this become the sewer water, become new water, and then so you treat them, and then you pump the new water into the supply also. So this is the system. And if you look at it on the map, you see we actually kept every river in Singapore because that's the only way you can. Our hope is to capture 90% of all the rainwater in Singapore. Okay. And this is so far the catchment area. We're increasing that, but the catchment area is subdivided into smaller catchment areas, and we actually use the very deep tunnel by gravity to bring all the sewer water into one treatment plant and free up all the old sewer water for development. So we save land in the process, but it costs money to do it. And we also have this deep network to supply the water, the new water, to different parts of Singapore. And also recently we set up 2 desalination plants. They are among the largest in the world, just to prove to ourselves that we have the skill and technology to do the desalination. Now that was really the hard part of it. But in order to help people in Singapore to protect our water, to appreciate the water, we introduced this ABC water. A is active, B is beautiful, C is clean. And so that we turn this water into part of the daily life. Okay, there are 3 approaches. One is to develop the master plan, as you saw. 2 is to sustain the publicity so that people are aware of what the government is doing. And with the help of grassroots leaders, means the community leaders. And then also encourage the public sector and the private sector to adopt this new water, the ABC water concept. Just remember, A is active, B is beautiful, C is clean. Okay, we want people to support and subscribe to this concept. And what have we achieved? Okay, so because that means we convert a lot of this pure engineering water channel into beautiful canals and becomes a kind of scenic beauty. And we have done 28 of them, to be another 100 to do. And we get all kinds of awards from around the world for the work that we have done. You see, for example, this used to be just a U-shaped concrete drain in a straight line. Now we break down the concrete drain and turn it, turn it into something that people can use, can enjoy. So there's a lot of this kind of community promotion. And of course, behind that, this is public housing. And we have this public sector support, like the Public Housing and Development Boards, to clear the squatters, the Port Authority to move the boat from Singapore River out into the ports, the Public Utility Boards to do the integrated management of the different types of water supply, and many other agencies to support. Private sector, we get them to help us set up or design and build the desalination plant and so on. So and also the local communities like schools and also some NGOs, just to help them to educate the people, to promote their feeling for the care of our rivers and reservoirs. So I think up to now, we can count on 5 main benefits of our water management. One is we are putting water bodies as part of the urban planning system, because in the urban planning system you have to put commerce, industry, housing, infrastructure and so on, and even green parks. But in Singapore, water body is an integral part of our master planning system. We put them in. In fact, the map you saw earlier that we have a lot of rivers and so on, we actually have added quite a lot of new man-made reservoirs so that the water from the rivers will go into the reservoir and then pump to the treatment plant to the So in fact I would say that any other city, I would say almost every city in my mind, I think should think about water body as part of the regular planning land use, and because that's the only way the world can hope to solve the water shortage problem. But Singapore has done that. And therefore, we are self-sufficient in our water supply to our citizens. And because of ABC Water, the presence of water in our city enhances the quality of life, because the reservoir in the past was not accessible by the people, but now people can go all the way to the edge of the reservoir, can even row the boat in the reservoir under certain control. So water is not just, the water bodies are not just for supply purpose, it is actually part of the daily life of Singaporeans. And because of the government's commitment to make this self-sufficient, so Singapore now is becoming one of the key centers of water technology research. We attract a lot of big firms from around the world to come to Singapore to do research, because they believe that when they do research in Singapore, when they have a good idea, like producing water at a lower cost, Singapore government would readily use the finding of the research. And also, since 2006, when we promoted this so-called ABC Water, we have attracted about 150 companies. We have set up 26 research centers. And in last year alone, we actually generated 150 million of revenue and create 500 jobs. So it is not only solving the water, it has got economic benefits. Now, this is an advertisement to all of you, and that is as a chairman of the Center for Liveable Cities, every 2 years we create a World City Summit in Singapore, World City Summit. And in the World City Summit, we also have the SIW, this Singapore International Water Week at the same time, plus a few other activities. So for example, this year in June, we attracted 20,000 participants in Singapore. And I'm saying this, of course it's advertisement, but also to say that if you want to know more about Singapore water experience or urban planning experience, maybe look to 2014 will be another World City Summit in Singapore. And the Singapore International Water Week actually had the so-called Water Leaders Summit to discuss water issues during that week. And also some thematic forums to exchange experiences during the week as well. And also on the business side, they also exchange, and there's also an exhibition. So it is a good place. Really, this is less advertisement than to inform you that it is a good place, because a lot of experts from around the world come here just to talk about how to solve the water supply issue. So that's the end of my talk, and I can't believe that I'm 7 minutes ahead of time. But since I have a little bit of time, I want to say that this is the Singapore City Hall, Supreme Court, the big square here. On the National Day, this is Singapore flag. And the painting was done by my father, who was a well-known artist. Thank you.
Bom, nós vamos abrir para perguntas. Quem quiser fazer perguntas, peço que faça por escrito e encaminhe as recepcionistas. Túlio, primeiro queria agradecer imensamente a sua presença e ter atendido o nosso pedido, essa longa viagem, e também sabendo da sua intensa agenda como gestor e como desenhista, né? Para quem não sabe, o professor Liu, uma das coisas que ele nos pediu é que visitasse uma igreja em São Paulo, o que ele fará amanhã, porque o cartão de final de ano dele será um desenho que ele fará dessa igreja. Então, De fato, desde o primeiro momento, a relação com o Dr. Liu foi uma relação que estendeu esses pontos que ele abordou aqui. E, de fato, não só trazendo essa visão da gestão, mas trazendo também a visão da arte e de outras preocupações com a cidade. E, de fato, isso acho que está muito simbolizado no resultado que a gente vê em Singapura, que é uma cidade que hoje discute essencialmente a sua função primária, que é ofertar qualidade de vida para os seus cidadãos. Nós aqui no Brasil estamos longe dessa realidade, seja nas capitais ou seja nos pequenos e médios municípios, com variações, obviamente, com casos isolados, mas de uma maneira geral nós estamos muito distantes dessa sofisticação do planejamento urbano. Agora, eu senti falta na apresentação do senhor de uma coisa e que a gente entende sobre o ponto de vista do Arq.Futuro como uma questão talvez central dessa transformação urbana, que é a cidadania. O Brasil vive um processo democrático recente e, de fato, a gente sente na sociedade uma pouca participação comunitária nas decisões de transformação urbana. Eu queria que o senhor falasse um pouco disso. Qual foi o papel da sociedade civil, da comunidade, nessa transformação tão radical e tão profunda que Singapura passou? Quer dizer, mesmo tendo uma forte liderança política, qual foi o papel, qual foi a contribuição da sociedade civil nessa transformação?
Well, certainly the world has changed. So between, say, 1960 and 1990, without the common use of the internet and the phone, it was the voice of a citizen was not as loud as it is now. So to start with, I'll say that we were fortunate that we did a lot of things during, say, between 60 and 90s, a lot of things, with minimum resistance from the public opinion. It's harder for Singapore to carry on the same way as we used to. But having said that, I want to qualify by saying that in my mind, because I was in the government for 24 years, and particularly in public housing, I had to face the residents. You know, I think by the time I left, there were like 2.5 million residents living in public housing. I had to face them. I had to deal with their complaints and so on. And my conclusion in dealing with them was that if you explain your policies very respectfully and very rationally and clearly, they would accept. So in my 24 years in the government, not only that I never had to face unpleasant incidents, not even once, but also I get a lot of goodwill from the press and from the citizens whenever I happen to be in the streets. Now, so what happened? I think what Singapore government did, so I was just a part in the big government machinery. What the Singapore government did was that the government's action must be very, very, very disciplined. For example, when we decided to acquire a piece of land from the private sector, we have to go through the proper process. And then when we announce that we're going to acquire this piece of land, we have to state, we have to explain what this piece of land is acquired for what purpose. And the government never once deviate from that. That means when we say we'll acquire this for this purpose, like for road construction, then we actually build for the road construction. It will never be used for other purpose. So the government earned the trust of the people, because in looking back, a lot of the government policies, not a lot, at least a fair portion of the government policies, could not be understood by the voters, because they're ahead of the voters' personal experience. And therefore, how do you get them to accept? If they cannot understand why the government wants to implement this policy, is to earn their trust. They trust the government that this policy, when it's implemented, is for the benefit of the people. So we're creating a kind of virtuous circle for the government to be able to act very fast, to act ahead of time without resistance. And I just want to give you one concrete example to help you understand this. In 1969, when I went back to Singapore from America, I was training public housing, and I read the letters, the readers' letter to editors every day, very, very carefully. And they were full of complaints to say that, we are the squatters, we live in a squatter colony for the last 3 generations. Why do you have to force us to go to high-rise public housing? So, but then 3 or 4 years later, around 1971 to 72, still a lot of complaint letters in the newspaper, but the complaint was that we have been waiting for 3 years. Why are you not moving us into public housing? Now, where's the secret? The secret is that we plan our public housing very, very carefully to make sure that when the squatter move from the squatter colonies to public housing, their life improve. Not only that they have a cleaner housing with sunlight, with electricity, and cross ventilation, but also nearby we provide school for them, provide shop for them, provide jobs for them. We even extend the bus services to this new location. And therefore, the secret here, to my mind, is that if we do our job very well and demonstrate to the people that their life is improved through the government action, they would generally support the government's policy. That's why this morning the title of my talk is Towards Intelligent Planning. We have to plan our work very intelligently, and therefore you can win the support of the people.
Thank you. Eu queria um aviso aqui, estão nos perguntando se os vídeos estão disponibilizados e as apresentações estão. Tudo está disponível no site do Arq.Futuro, que é o www.arq.Futuro.com.br. Nós temos aqui há 3 perguntas que interessam a mesma questão, e eu queria aproveitar porque elas falam sobre o financiamento e sobre essa grande transformação urbana. Eu vou falar e queria aproveitar para fazer uma propaganda. Nós lançamos ontem aqui no Arq.Futuro o livro que tratou essa questão, inovação no financiamento da transformação urbana, que é o reflexo dos painéis que nós tivemos aqui o ano passado, acrescentado de novos artigos, novos textos. Todo esse trabalho foi coordenado pelo Sérgio Lazzarini, professor do INSPER. Então temos esse livro que eu acho que traz uma abordagem bastante inovadora e com visões de transformação e novas soluções no financiamento urbano. Isto posto, a gente começa aqui com perguntas e, de fato, o senhor também liderou esse massivo programa de habitação social em Singapura, né? E nós estamos vivendo na cidade de São Paulo, ou talvez dramaticamente, né? Acabamos de votar um plano diretor que, apesar de ter trazido inovações bastante importantes em vários aspectos, acabou ficando sujeito a pressões específicas, né? Ou seja, de novo, comprometendo esse desenho urbano de longo prazo, esse planejamento de longo prazo. Mas acho que a questão central aqui é a questão da habitação social. Há uma carência de habitação social em escala realmente desumana. E aqui tem 3 perguntas que interessam essa questão, que eu acho importantes. A primeira, alguém pergunta qual era a questão, como é que foi tratada a propriedade das terras urbanas. Esse é um ponto importante. Quer dizer, hoje o grande problema da construção de moradia social em cidades é o custo da terra, né? Quer dizer, nós vivemos esse drama que foi de construir habitação social longe da cidade, e no fundo nós estamos criando áreas de exclusão e não de inclusão de cidadania. Essas pessoas ficam marcadas e longe do seu lugar de trabalho. Então essa é a questão importante. A segunda pergunta é: qual foi a fonte dos recursos financeiros para a implantação das intervenções urbanas em Singapura? E, por fim, se há recursos financeiros do orçamento público e qual foi o montante de recursos privados. Então, como é que foi essa transformação e qual foi a forma de financiamento? Que é também uma pergunta que é como deslocar uma grande quantidade de pessoas que moram em favelas.
Okay. In 1960, when we started, as you saw earlier, we had lots and lots of squatters. So basically, the city was concentrated very near the current central area, and outside the central area would be just lots of squatters. So. So by our building, so when we first started doing public housing, we will build the public housing on the fringe of the city itself, and then slowly grow outward in all directions, just slowly going outwards. So that means the squatters will be clear and move to somewhere near the city. Then the next one will be a little bit further away from city, further away from city. And therefore, they are never very far away from the central area in those days for jobs, for amenities and so on. But because of careful planning, we did not just put the housing, the poor people all together in one bunch. In between the public housing, we have private housing in between, or even very expensive bungalows or villas in between. So at any part of the city, there's always a good integration of the socio-economic groups, and this was done consciously. And in fact, one other important thing about public housing is that in the whole of Singapore, that means in one city, we have only one public housing policy. In contrast, like in China, they have 5 to 6 public housing policies, and some for the very poor, some for the less poor, some for a bit better. And so each one of them will do its own development. So in doing so, you actually tend to segregate the communities, separate them. But in our case, we have only one policy. That means in every new town, we will build for the poorest as well as the less poor, or even, in fact, some of the medical doctors and junior managers, because of the income is too low to buy private housing, they also stay in our public housing area. So that's why just now I mentioned that we do not have poverty ghettos, because in any community, any housing estate or new towns, you have a good mixture of different socio-economic economic sectors. So I think the fact that we have only one policy to cater for a wide range of people who need public housing is a very important factor in our success story. And also the fact that we build as close to the traditional central city as possible and slowly move out. And the fact that we mix public housing in new towns with private housing. All these things, again, that's why I emphasize that when we plan, we have to plan intelligently. We have to think through these very practical issues so that we don't create undesirable consequence. So that's the first question. The second one, in terms of finance, it is all government. And you see, first of all, we have to thank the British colonial government to leave behind two things. One is some of the the multinational companies already were in Singapore in 1960. And when we became an independent country, one of the first things that our political leader said to the international companies is that we want you to stay. We would not want to nationalize your companies. Now, in many other former colonial countries, when they became independent, one of the first things they do was to nationalize the foreign companies. We did not do that. Not only we didn't do that, we assured them that we want them to stay. We want them to contribute to our economic activities. So this is one thing we did right. And second thing is that the British government left behind a very efficient tax collection system. And therefore, even though the government is just 1 day old or 1 year old, we already have a continuous stream of taxation income. And that helps us to finance some of the government projects, including public housing. But on top of that, the British government also left behind the Central Provident Fund. It is a compulsory saving system. That means everybody who earns any amount of money, no matter how little, even a few $100s, you must contribute to the Central Provident Fund X% of your income as a compulsory saving scheme. The money is yours, but you must contribute. And the Singapore government expanded on this by, for example, today, just to cut a long story short, if I earn $1,000 every month, at the end of each month, I have to contribute 16%, $160 to my Central Provident Fund. And my employer has to contribute another 18%, $180 to my Central Provident. That means if my salary is $1,000, every month I have $340 in my Central Provident Fund. And therefore, it makes it possible for people to buy the public housing over, say, a 25-year repayment period. And then also in public housing, as you saw earlier, we did not just build housing, we built shops, factories, and we provided car parks. Now, our policy is that we must make sure that people who rent our shops or our factories pay market value. That means the government made profit out of those shops and factories. And also they must pay market value for car parks. The government made profit out of car parks. So that means by having a total financial system, the government was able to pay for the subsidies of public housing. So it's a very clever scheme. I'm not an economist, I cannot explain more than this, but just to give an idea that these things were considered from the beginning in order for us to be able to afford public housing. So there was no private funding inside, it's all public funding.
Thank you. Senhor, bom, tem aqui uma sugestão, um convite, o senhor passar um dia na prefeitura, na verdade, aqui em São Paulo. Na verdade, ele vai passar. O doutor Liu tem uma audiência com o prefeito, Fernando Haddad, e com o secretário de Desenvolvimento Urbano, Fernando de Melo Franco. Então, já está acertado. Nós temos aqui uma série de perguntas sobre água e eu vou juntá-las porque, infelizmente, é a nossa última pergunta, embora eu tenha recebido aqui várias perguntas muito interessantes. E aqui uma das coisas que nós discutimos ontem foi muito a questão, você viu que para a recuperação, para enfrentar a crise da água, uma das coisas a ser feitas no curto prazo é a perda, o volume de perda, o percentual de perda de água na canalização para abastecimento. Queria que o senhor falasse sobre essa questão, se o senhor tem uma ideia qual é o índice de perda de Singapura. Nós aqui em São Paulo temos um índice de 37% de perda de água, e esse índice do Brasil chega em certos municípios a 70%. Ou seja, nós estamos enfrentando uma crise e ainda temos uma ineficiência no transporte de água dramática. Temos aqui outras perguntas ainda relativas que como Singapura enfrenta as questões de poluição da China, ou seja, de água e de ar, quer dizer, como os senhores estão se preparando para essa resiliência dessa questão. E como vocês enfrentaram a questão de limpar a água e os rios, sendo que foi uma cidade que criou um nível de adensamento bastante acentuado. E como fazer a boa convivência dos cursos de água das cidades, né? Só para esclarecer, aqui São Paulo tem em torno de 130 rios cobertos, né? Quer dizer, nós realmente fomos uma cidade que viramos as costas para o rio, e hoje há algumas iniciativas trabalhando isso de uma maneira bastante atomizada, comunitária, mas com muito valor e com muito simbolismo. Como Singapura tratou essa questão dos córregos e rios, né? Apesar desse adensamento. E por fim, qual é a sua sugestão para São Paulo?
I'm not an expert in water, but I'll try and that is, first of all, by virtue of public housing, massive scale of public housing, we make use of public housing's capacity to resettle squatters into our high-rise public housing. So it took Housing and Development Board 10 years to clear all the squatters on the two banks of Singapore River. Because, you know, in the old days, I would say most villagers and so on, they would need to live near the river in order to get their water supply. So it took us 10 years to do that. And therefore, today, the Singapore River is clean. In fact, after 10 years of moving the squatters out, keeping the river clean, and putting the new sewer, the person in charge of the engineering work of Singapore River, cleaning Singapore River, he went into the river, took a cup of water and drank in front of everybody to prove that it was clean. So, I mean, this process is repeated on all other rivers. So public housing has this one additional function, is to help the government to clean the rivers. So this is, once you have a good policy, that's why today I emphasize the importance of public housing. Once you have a good policy, it creates a series of good virtuous circle. And actually, because our rivers are everywhere, and of course to collect the river from a small river to the bigger river, eventually we have to create new reservoirs. So we created quite a lot of new reservoirs for all the rivers to run into the reservoirs. And therefore, at the moment, about 60 to 70% of the rainwater is kept. Only 30–40% flow into the sea. And we're hoping to reach 90%. Now, this is the first question. The second question about pollution. The pollution from China is mainly air pollution, but it will not come to Singapore. Hong Kong is affected by the pollution in southern China. And unfortunately for them, for Hong Kong, because of that, quite a lot of the major multinational companies are relocating their companies and the families to Singapore because of pollution. But we have our own air pollution from Indonesia. For example, right now in Indonesia, Sumatra, which is southwest of Singapore, every year around this time, they will burn their forests. So the farmers will burn the trees and so on, and in order to create the fertilizer for their agricultural products. And when the wind blows from Sumatra to Singapore, we get pollution. But our government has been very patient. We've been talking to Indonesian government to try to control that. We even offer technical support to help them solve this problem, and I am confident that this will be done. The scale of the pollution from Indonesia to Singapore is much, much smaller than the scale of pollution from southern China. And
the last question is, how do you protect the rivers, and what is your suggestion for São Paulo?
On the basis that I'm a 2-day expert of Sao Paulo, I really, this is very immodest of me to give suggestions. But I must say I've been extremely well treated, very well briefed in the last 2 days. So I would say that for your city plan, I would try to make a long-term projection, like what I always do in China, like 60 years, 70 years, and then divide them into, for example, Sao Paulo now, the Sao Paulo region, I think you have about around plus or minus 20 million people, which is huge. And I would suggest that don't treat it as one city, treat it maybe like 5 cities of 4 million people. And each city will have its own central business district, its own universities, its own hospitals, its own industrial areas, so that people don't have to travel long distance to come to one place. And the other thing, when it comes to water, I would say that, based on whatever I understand, I think because your supply of natural water is very, very limited. Unlike Singapore, we're lucky that we have a lot of rainfall and a lot of rivers. Our rainfall every year used to be like 1,800 millimeters per year. The last few years it went up to 2,100 millimeters, which is a lot. So we could rely more on rainwater. You may have to, and you are far from the sea also, you may have to rely more on the new water, the recycled sewer water. And to do so, you have to have an improved sewage system, so that you capture the wastewater to become new water. But before you do that, I suggest that you plan the city first, so that all the sewer pipes will be running at the right places and not at the wrong places. Otherwise, your investment will not be optimized.
Thank you.